The simplicity of the gospel.
This is the simplicity of the gospel brought to you by the Pegwell Community Church of Christ Church in Barbados, where we teach things that pertain to life and godliness. Glad that you're with us online, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, and those of you who are right here in the sanctuary, welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you in the house of God. Tonight, we want to move on to something else different. And maybe you've never heard a sermon on this tonight before, but tonight I want to talk a little bit about empathy. It might take me an hour to cover this. You see, when you practice empathy instead of sympathy, I'm going to explain it to those in a few minutes. When you practice empathy instead of sympathy, you can get some emotional clarity so that you could build important relationships. You could build a relationship with people because you get some clarity of emotions when you are into empathy and not sympathy. There's a big difference between empathy and sympathy, although we use the words interchangeably and they're not the same. Tonight I want to talk about empathy, but I'm going to tell you a lot about what sympathy is as well. And it allows us to see another's point of view. You're going to hear me say later on, I'm going to say some things more than once. I'll say some things even 3 times because I want to get it. That when you are empathizing, you put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And so you're not quick to judge because you don't have facts. That's empathy. Sympathy is something else. But let me read verbatim so that you don't get confused. When you empathize, you could get to see somebody else's point of view. You can acknowledge everyone's feeling in a given situation. This is empathy we were talking about. And this is especially helpful when you are a leader. People don't always understand the position that the leader takes, but many times the leader has to sit where you sit. For example, if sometimes you may come to church and say you didn't get anything out of the preaching, I know you'll be lying, but if you did say that, you should have some empathy, which will say, see that pastor there? He got to preach to 80-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds, people who are educated, people who are not educated, people who are happy, people who are sad, and all of that in one sermon. All of that he has to do in one sermon. So if you didn't get what you think you should get, then you put yourself in my position and maybe you'll understand a little bit better. And on the way back in the car, you don't say, I ain't getting nothing at all tonight. You probably didn't get anything at all, but you might be surprised to know the WhatsApp messages I get and the calls I get about the things that are heard from the pulpit here. So having empathy can help you to improve your communication skills. This is why we're talking about empathy tonight. It can help you to improve your communication skills. Why? That is because you are able to listen fully to others and understand their perspectives. People can only see from their point of view or their viewpoint, but they don't listen enough. They don't listen fully to others to understand the other person's perspective. Let me jump ahead of myself and tell you something that should never happen, and we are not going to be soft on this. We are not going to be compromising on this, and it has to do with abortion. Abortion is murder. Abortion is sin. Abortion should not take place. You got that so far? Okay, let's empathize with the person who's getting the abortion. Let's put yourself in the person of the shoes of the person who's having that abortion. Could your heart go out to that person because you empathize? Could you put yourself in her shoes and find out why she's having this abortion? She was raped, or she thinks no, I start out by telling you it's wrong. I'm not soft-soaking abortion, huh? So please don't leave here and say that. But I'm saying, let's put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We're always willing to ostracize somebody when they do something. We're always willing to cut off somebody. And the more holy you are, the more prone you are to do that because you're holier than anybody else. And we don't put ourselves in anybody else's shoes. And we're always down on somebody. We're down on somebody. You don't have the facts. You don't know why the person says this, or does that, or whatever. How many of you understanding me? Give me a nod of your head. So we've got to learn to be empathetic. Research shows that empathy can help sustain cooperation when somebody's going through a dilemma. Just by empathy. I'm going to tell you what empathy is in a minute. Other studies have found that in a service setting, empathy can reduce discrimination and also unethical behavior. If you empathize with somebody, you could deal with a little bit more with discrimination and unethical behavior. And this is important if we are going to have a happier, healthier workplace or happy or healthier church. I'm talking about empathy. What is empathy? Listen carefully. What is empathy? I'm not talking about sympathy, I'm talking about empathy. Empathy is having thoughts about what you judge to be how somebody else feels. You could judge how that person is feeling. They didn't tell you anything. But a young lady who's 16, 15, who just had the abortion, can you put yourself in her place and judge how she feels? Anybody with me? You look at me like you're not understanding me. All right? Can you put yourself in that position? Or some other situation? We're going to look at some biblical examples in a few minutes. When in conversation, I'm talking about sympathy. This is sympathy I'm talking about. So let me go back. I said empathy, but I mean sympathy. Sympathy is having thoughts, sometimes even the wrong thoughts, about what you judge about how somebody else feels. You're judging about how somebody else feels. You don't know. Sympathy is also giving unsolicited advice when in a conversation. You know, you call somebody because you're having a problem and they don't ever stop talking. Do you know you call somebody who have a problem and they start off and end by giving you advice? You know something, you only want somebody to listen to you. Those people, that's what somebody wants to sympathize with you. They want to sympathize with you, so they're quick to give you advice. You didn't ask for any advice. You don't want any advice. As a matter of fact, although you call them, you can't even get the word on the side. Anybody know? You know anybody like that? Don't ever stop talking. Sympathy, you pass judgment. You want to sympathize with somebody, but you're passing judgment rather, and you're going to find that empathy sometimes is the best. In sympathy, you only notice the surface level of an issue. She husband don't come church with you, they must don't get along. Surface issue. You don't know anything deep. You don't know, and if you have that attitude, it's good that you don't know anything deep about them anyway. How many understand what I just said? You know, just surface, just on the surface. You just see people, and on the surface you make judgments. You don't know what is happening. You don't know why they do what they do. You don't know, but you make judgments. That will come under sympathy. Only surface level issues. In sympathy, you only understand from one perspective. You only understand from one perspective. You're not concerned about any other situations at all. Your perspective is your perspective, and you are right. No. Unlike empathy, sympathy is practicing. It doesn't mean in sympathy, sorry, unlike empathy, sympathy doesn't mean that you feel what the other person feels. When you sympathize with somebody, your mother died, I sympathize with you, I don't feel what you feel. So when you meet somebody who has a death in the family and you tell them, I understand what you're going through, just shut up. You don't understand what you're going through at all, especially if you never had one. I mean, in the family, I'm not talking about extended relatives and things like that. So sympathy, you may feel bad for somebody in sympathy, but you don't understand how they feel. You might feel bad for somebody, but you don't understand how they feel. Now, all these things that I'm telling you, you're going to discover that they're going to be necessary if the church is going to move on together, if we're going to understand each other, if we're going to be able to synchronize, and we're not going to be somebody left field. We're not going to be like square pegs and round holes. We are going to have to understand sympathy. Sympathy from the dictionary now is this: feelings of pity and sorrow for somebody else's misfortune. You feel sorry that the boy got shot in his head, but you don't know how his mother feels about it. That's sympathy for you. It means feelings of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Yeah, I'm sorry that he got shot. I'm sorry that that happened. But you don't know how his mother feels. You don't know how his father feels. You don't know how his sister feels. They're going to tell you later on that empathy now is the opposite of that. You could feel sympathy for somebody without sitting where they're sick. You could feel sympathy for somebody without understanding. It's an unfortunate situation that happened, and the normal thing is to feel sympathy, but not that you're empathetic at all. You have not put yourself in the shoes of that mother that you see in the paper crying. If you put yourself in her shoes, then there's empathy. But sympathy is, oh, I'm so sorry that that happened. Anybody with me so far? Empathy, no, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of somebody else. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of somebody else. We need this in church. We need this in the body of Christ. And we need it so much today when people are really needy. People need help here, there, and everywhere. People need jobs. People are going to approach you. You're going to hear things about other people in the church or in the society. And if it was a time that we need people to empathize, it is now. Sympathy involves understanding from your own perspectives. And many times you're wrong. With sympathy, you understand from your own perspective. But many times you're wrong. You think you're right. You know, there are people in church who think that the pastor never does anything right. The church is growing. People are getting saved. You're having new products. Things are happening, blah, 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 blah. But these persons think that the pastor doesn't know what he's doing or he's not doing anything at all. That is from your own perspective. Like I said, you're not seeing or you're not knowing below the surface level. You're just on the surface. And after we have this tonight, I think that we will stop doing that because we don't know the facts. I find that one thing about Christian people is that they find it difficult to say these three words. I don't know. They always think that they have to give an answer and they know everything about everything. But so many times you are far. Let me give you an example. How many of you have been pontificating so far today about the new changes in COVID? You know, they have a lot of different changes and people are already pontificating. That's just a big word. It's mainly, you're like the pontiff, the pope. You know, the pope speaks ex cathedra, and when he speaks, whatever he says is law in that part of the world. So we behave like that sometimes. But do you know the facts why the situations change? Do you know why the Ministry of Health changed the situation? Do you know what the results are? Do you know how many persons there are that are fully vaccinated that still died as opposed to all the others who are not vaccinated? Do you have any of this information at all? No. But then people doing bare foolishness. Every 2 weeks they're changing things. Every 2 weeks they're changing something. Them doing bare foolishness. You see, that is not the way to go. That is just your surface perception, and it is not good enough. Sympathy involves understanding from your own perspective. Empathy involves putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding why they may have these particular feelings. Put yourself. Why aren't some people yet back out to church for 2 years after the virus? When them so foolish, everybody that's coming to church, why them don't come to church? Have you put yourself in that person's shoes? Do you know what sort of sickness, I don't know what you call it, that they can't come among people that they think pass germs? Do you know they have some kind of phobia? They can't touch this, they can't touch that, so they think the best place is to be at home. Have you ever thought about that? Or your idea is only them so foolish, everybody come to church, why them can't come to church too? No. You need to put yourself in somebody's shoes. We can give you some scriptures later on. You need to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And we will get along well as Christians. There'll be so much love. There'll be so much understanding. And that is the atmosphere in which the Spirit of God moves.
The simplicity of the gospel.